What's up, guys? Back with another video. Today we're going to talk about renting versus buying. I kind of touched on that in some videos, but have a whole video dedicated to it now. So let's get started. So renting versus buying slash owning, I would like to specifically call it. So number one, it depends on your financial situation. So whenever you are buying or renting something, you have to know number one, if you're renting, well, you're putting money towards somebody else's property, but you have a place to stay. Now, when you're buying, you're in the process of becoming a homeowner, but you have to go through a lot more loopholes per se because you're gonna check your credit, they're gonna check see if you're approved for a mortgage and how much the mortgage, excuse me, the loan will be for that mortgage. So maybe you have to take out one loan from your bank and maybe another one from somewhere else, but at the same time, regardless of the fact, there's different attributes that go to this. So number one, you have to understand your associated costs. So with your associated costs, let's go at renting. So renting, obviously you have to understand that it's a monthly payment that is fixed unless the landlord decides to charge you go up on rent. Whereas your mortgage can pretty much stay the same as well, but at the same time you still have fees, HOA fees, and insurance maybe, and everything else that's tied into it. So you just got to understand what is in total of those costs. Now, rentings, I mean, some properties, whenever you're at an apartment complex, you're able to have your utilities fashioned in with that. But at the same time, when you're a homeowner, you can have your HOA, you can have your insurance, etc., and your utilities might be on the side. So it just depends how you budget it, but you have to understand the associated costs that go with renting versus buying. So that's just a general thing for both of them. So here's a renting. It's a predictable monthly expense. You already know how much you're going to pay with rentings. Let's say rent right now would be about 1,800 to 2,100 because I'm here in Florida. Let's just say everything's absurd right now, but that's besides the point. So it's predictable monthly expense. You can understand where you're going to put your money towards, how much you're going to put towards, and if everything's in total, like if you're in an apartment or a townhouse and things come together, then it's like, okay, you know that all of your bills are pretty much in one besides your car payment or a phone bill or whatever, but maybe 80% of your bills or 85, 90% of your bills are all in total one is because of the place that you're staying at, and your repairs are handled by your landlord. So when you're a renter, call the landlord, hey, look, this broke, they pay for it. It's their property. Not unless you damage or something, you two can go back and forth with it. But at the same time, if you're saying, hey, maintenance costs, they take care of it. Why? It's their property. You're paying them to live there, but it's not your expense because you don't own it. They own it. So when they own it, they incur every single cost that is needed for maintenance, unless you have a contract or something that says otherwise. But most of the time, the landlord handles it. So here's the thing with owning. So it feels more stable because now you're saying it's your home. For example, when you're renting, the renter can say, hey, I'm selling the house. Will they sell it to you? They could. They could say, hey, you've been a great person, been a great renter, we're going to go ahead and sell it to you and say, here, you have the first option. You have the first bid on it. Or they can just say, hey, we found another buyer. Unfortunately, we're going to give you like a 2 months to get out, 3 months to get out. So obviously there's some days that I should tell you ahead of time, but they can just sell the property and tell you, hey, you have to leave. So that's very cutthroat. It's very unfortunate. So when you're owning a house, obviously the only thing that can happen that's worse is it gets foreclosed on. But at the same time, if you know what you're doing, you're paying things, you have great steady income, you put a big down payment on your house, then it feels more stable to you because that's just an intangible thing that you can feel saying, hey, I know that nobody's selling the house but me, or nobody's incurring the cost but me. So you have control of your own property. You don't have somebody else's property that you're living at where they can control you. Also, it has equity when you build equity in, because when you're putting money into a rental, like when you're renting, not a rental property, but when you're renting, you're putting money into somebody else's pockets. You're putting money somewhere else. You're not building it up for yourself. So, yeah, it just depends on how people's situation is. And it's no right or wrong answer. There's no talking down on somebody for renting. But when you're renting and when you have like a stable income and you feel like this is your career, try to see if you could buy sometimes, because yeah, it may be a harder process, but at the same time, when you're renting, think about you renting for 10 years, 15 years, you're putting that money towards somebody else's pockets, whereas if you were owning, that'd be going towards your house. Build up the equity, therefore you build that value in the house, and obviously with everything going up here, your property values go up, property taxes go up as well, but at the same time, you have a property, your value is going up, you're putting money in, so now it's building inside of that property. And you can also have tax deductions whenever tax time rolls around. So renting versus owning, we're going to get into two more classification, well, not classification, but we're going to split them up again. So renting, you might have a rental increase. That's a con of it. So when your lease or whatever, your contract's up or whatever you signed is up with the renter, they say, hey, look, everything's going up, so I have to charge higher rent. That's just how it goes. When you sign a lease for an apartment, your rent is going to go up most likely, unless they favor you or they say, hey, we're not going to do it. But at the same time, with things going up and the cost of living is getting higher everywhere, especially in Florida, the cost of living is just absurd right now compared to wages. So everything might go up. Then the landlord might also sell that property unexpectedly. So then that's the cons. But at the same time, if you're renting, all those maintenance and utility, those maintenance items, they're taken care of by the landlord. So you just got to think about the pros and cons of this. And it might be helpful when the housing market is too expensive. See, that's a pro to it though. So the housing market, like right now in Tampa, the housing market's insane. You get somewhere that's not in the best of areas, and it probably was worth maybe $130,000 back before 2020. And now you look at it and you're saying, well, why is that property like $300,000? Well, obviously, sometimes people build up around in the neighborhoods, and then it kind of runs out the people that have been there for so long, and now everybody else has to pay higher property tax. So everybody else sees that, oh, that area's now being built up with nicer houses, more expensive houses. So everybody else's value is going to go up. Now, some things are very absurd and asinine, and they don't need to be certain prices, but that's just how the market rolls. So if you could rent and you can find a rental place that is better than somewhere to buy, then you found yourself a very good gem. Now, here's the thing with owning. Your mortgage might be smaller than rent because on average, well, not on average, but from what I can say or what I can see is that at a time where I see my family when they were renting versus when they're owning now, the mortgage is smaller than the rent. And for this specific purpose, that the fact that not only it's just the regular payment of the house, but it's also including the insurance, it's also including the HOA fees. So most of those things that entail things that are needed for the house or for the community as well, it all adds up and it's way much smaller than the rent. But the associated fees, which are those HOA, landscaping, property taxes, which are a very big thing, and your insurance, those may be able to overshadow that mortgage payment. And therefore, you might say, well, renting's a little bit cheaper. Let me just build myself up. I can still save money. I can still budget. That way, down the line, I can be able to put down on the house. That is awesome. That is amazing. But you just have to know what my second point was earlier in the video, understanding the associated costs. Because yeah, the mortgage may be smaller, but at the same time, if you're paying for HOA it kicks you in the butt sometimes. But landscaping as well, so they could cut the grass around the properties and cut the grass in the community. The property taxes kill. Those things are, end of year property taxes. Nobody wants them, but it just happens because you're paying tax on your property that you own. And your insurance, if you have private mortgage insurance or you have any house insurance, flood insurance, fire insurance, that's tacked on most likely. So you just have to understand those associated fees, and it can drive up that payment heavily. So that's just a little bit on renting versus buying, or renting versus buying / owning a house. So it depends on your associated costs. Obviously, when you're owning, you have to go through the transaction fees, such as the closing cost and your buyer agent fees, etc. But overall, the main thing is understand the associated costs, understand where your money is, and understand, do you feel like this is something that you can have money left over from and take care of things by yourself and know you have enough wealth or money built up that way you could be able to take care of maintenance, etc.? Or do you feel like you just go ahead and rent and then you could go ahead and buy it later? It depends on you. Obviously, everybody will say buy, but sometimes renting is just necessary at the time because either the housing market's too bad or people can't afford to buy or don't have the credit score, don't have the amount of a loan to really put down on the house. So it just depends on that, and it depends on your bank as well, it depends on who you're buying with, etc., etc. So the main thing is, guys, if you're going to buy in the future, or if you're looking for a house, or if you're renting right now saying you want to buy, if you're buying right now and saying it's a lot on you, just remember, understanding for any future reference, understand those associated costs that come with buying versus renting. So thanks guys for watching. Tune in the next video. Appreciate you. See you next time.